What's the good word, y'all? DKB here. So, very interesting question that I came up with, and just kind of as I was putting some things together, it kind of struck me that maybe this whole Mike White elevation to starting quarterback, and even him becoming a second string backup quarterback, maybe this was planned. So, my caveat before we dive into things here would be that Robert Saleh has been one of my favorite coaches since at least being a fan, most definitely within the last 10 years. He's kind of overtaken Todd Bowles for me, but he's the most upcoming, straightforward, honest coach that we've had. His biggest blunder in the media has really when it's come to injuries, and I think a lot of that has been on the athletic health and performance staff, and some of these timetables that are being relayed, and the information, and maybe a bit on the player side too, as well as just bad handling by Robert Saleh. So outside of that, you can't speak highly enough about him. So when we dive back into things, Mike White, I want to say he's been with us since, I want to say 2020. I'm feeling like it's 2019, but it only feels like it's been 2 years. So either way, we step back in time. He's basically on the team in relative obscurity until an injury to Zach Wilson comes up in the Patriots game. And then we see him come in. He leaves a touchdown drive, opens a few eyes. The Bengals game hits, things completely change, right? We have all of the accolades coming out. First quarterback to throw in his first appearance for over 400 yards and 3 touchdowns. Definitely the first New York Jet to have any kind of performance like that. We send his jersey and stuff to the Hall of Fame immediately. It was an amazing time for us, and a bit of a scary time at the same time. We just invested this second round pick, this number 2 pick in the first round in Zach Wilson, who hasn't really, looked tremendous, I guess, to put it lightly, to start out. And then we get Mike White that's coming in, and, a 5th round pick from nowhere who hasn't been able to start on the field, goes out and decimates in the same offense. It was a scary time to be a fan if you were tied to Zach Wilson, which, maybe a lot of people consider foolish now. But yeah, we fast forward a couple, Bengals game was outstanding. Going into the Colts game, he looks good. The Buffalo Bills were making a lot of people look silly. We've seen a lot of deficiencies in Mike White's game at that point. And that's really what a lot of people are continuing to hang their hats on. And then, we don't really see much of him until, this preseason. Things are a little bit rocky. He gives a very telling performance that final week 3 preseason game, though. And then, again, relative obscurity. About a month ago, though, right before the trade deadline in the Week 8 Patriots game, though, we get the news that Mike White's being elevated to the backup quarterback instead of, or in replacement of Joe Flacco anyways. And it raised some eyebrows because the thinking was Mike White has already applied a little bit of pressure, the year prior after his performances. And there's a lot of people saying, Mike White could potentially be our savior, franchise quarterback, etc. Again, Zach Wilson wasn't looking great. This year is much of the same, right? In fact, in many ways, you could probably say he's taken a huge step back. Meanwhile, Mike White is still looking like, kind of a tasty dessert you don't really want to go and touch tonight, but it's kind of been calling your name. So we get the elevation. Obviously, this doesn't change anything about game day other than the fact that there's a little bit more pressure behind Zach Wilson now. If he has bad drives, terrible first half, second half, etc., you kind of have this feeling in the back of your mind now that, maybe the crowd starts chanting Mike White. You start kind of feeling that pressure to make something happen, and you press, and that never really ended up coming to fruition, but still. There was a few interesting things, though, because at the time when Robert Saleh got questioned about it, he mentioned we have to figure out what we have in him if that opportunity presents itself. And that opportunity that Robert Saleh was referring to was an injury situation. He had already mentioned multiple times at this point that the only way Zach Wilson wasn't going to see the field was if he was injured, so that we can figure out what we had in Zach Wilson. And then going back to Mike Wilson to kind of finish out the quote, just allow him the opportunity to practice and get his mind right. preparing as the second quarterback. So they want to get a little bit more of a tangible feel. I would assume there's a significant bump in reps from the third string quarterback to the second string quarterback. So you get definitely a more hands-on view, a better perspective of this guy that you've seen go out and be able to perform. You've seen some bad things on tape as well, but another year in the system, and as Robert Saleh mentioned, that just brings natural growth, not only as a player but as an individual, and keeping things consistent across the board as well. You can only expect that things will look much better for him. So with that in mind, it didn't sound too crazy at the time. Mike White would be the obvious guy for us to try to re-sign in the offseason as well, with him and Joe Flacco going on expiring contracts, just as a guy that can continue to be groomed kind of for the long haul. And when I hear that versus some of the things that have been going on now, we had the Garrett Wilson blow up after the Patriots game. Expletives everywhere. He obviously wasn't happy about the performance. Same thing with Denzel Mims. Excuse me. Tyler Conklin never really made a huge issue of it, but there was multiple guys that were getting missed all day long, and this has been a trend with Zach Wilson for his entire duration with the New York Jets so far. Accuracy has been a huge concern, which is pretty significant considering he didn't have the overwhelming tools like a Josh Allen or a Patrick Mahomes like everybody wanted to compare him to. I don't want to say he definitely wasn't in that tier, but he's essentially right below them in terms of some of the physical skill sets that he brings, but accuracy was supposed to be one of his calling cards. And throughout this entire 20 game portions of games that we've seen pieced together in between injuries, you can definitely see his mechanics are a little wacky. And Robert Saleh finally confirmed that as much. So the Garrett Wilson outcry, I feel like, wasn't something that was just a result of this one bad game. It was essentially a buildup of a lot of these performances that he was seeing. And then there was a lot of other stuff that was coming to light. Apparently, a lot of the teammates had concerns since the spring during OTAs and training camp and preseason about how Zach Wilson was performing and this offense was operating. But, the hope was that it was going to get better. The kicker to me was, and it's interesting because we're facing the Bears now, our previous cornerback that used to be on our team, Lamar Jackson, we thought maybe he could be a diamond in the rough. He had some comments to say which mentioned that he can see about the arrogant comments and stuff that people bring up in regards to Zach Wilson and why he may not be the most likable guy. And we're talking about a guy that was previously on the team, playing significantly enough against him during practices and, things like that. So he would have definitely as much of a close view as you can possibly get. He's a couple years removed now, but still. So piecing it all together, Zach Wilson not doing so hot for a long period of time, it makes me think that maybe Robert Saleh and Mike LaFleur kind of took a look at this weeks ago, back in week 8 when he was finally promoted to the second string role. And they thought if things continue to go south, maybe we win another game or two with Zach Wilson, but still there may be a time we need to ultimately bench him. Maybe they didn't predict that it gets this bad. But that is essentially the thought that I get. Once we got the second string news from Mike White, I felt like there's a little bit of a time clock that was a countdown, if you will, that was ticking away for Zach Wilson. And I don't see this being even a long-standing issue for those people that say, well, what happens now if Mike White succeeds? I don't think we're moving on from Zach Wilson, honestly. Mike White will go on. He'll get a contract with somebody else. Most likely, we will find a new person to come in and essentially be a backup, and that ultimately could be Zach Wilson. It doesn't make any sense not to at least let him play out his rookie contract and see if he can finally turn that corner at some point. But whether that be a Derek Carr trade, a Jimmy Garoppolo, I love that Jared Goff mentioned that some people dropped in the comments before. Irregardless, I don't know. That's just kind of where I'm at with it. Maybe I'm looking too deep into this, but let me know what you guys think. Do you feel like this could have been a move that they were prepped for in case Zach Wilson really couldn't get things going on the up and up, or is this just all circumstantial and it's the fact that he didn't have the accountability, how poorly he performed compared to Mac Wilson, kind of that culmination of things. But let me know what you guys' thoughts are in the comments, and I'll catch you again. Appreciate the support as always. Peace.